Okay, everyone, we are recording this meeting, and this is our online physics faculty meeting. Welcome to everyone who is joining us today. And again, I just want to apologize for getting started just a few minutes late. I'm hoping that we could begin by everyone typing into the chat. And what I would love to hear is, what would you say is the biggest question, challenge, problem of practice, issue that you're thinking about when it comes to moving your physics course or your physics courses into the online environment during COVID-19? So just go ahead and type into the chat. And what we've been doing in these meetings is we first kind of like to uncover through the chat what's kind of on the forefront of people's minds right now. Okay, great. So I'm seeing students, how do labs work? Okay, John, biggest concern, what to do with labs. Mackenzie, labs. The students need to play around with materials and fail. Okay, that's excellent. And how to conduct labs. Okay, so I'm seeing a distinct trend around labs. um, okay, and I'm seeing a couple other different things about, okay, and Christine, exams and quizzes, assessment. Okay, this is excellent. This is very good. So I think maybe what we might start by doing is let's focus maybe the first portion of this session on labs. And so I'm wondering if there's anyone who would be willing to kind of speak, take the mic. Just if you could voice, if you wrote it in the chat, what just let's just unpack what the problems are with labs or the questions right now. Anthony has volunteered to go first. Anthony, if you could unmute yourself and maybe just share a little bit about what you're thinking about with labs.
All right, so I have actually been teaching online physics for a few years. So I have a number of labs written up for online activities. Now I'll note that the vast majority that I'd had written up for the past were written up for algebra-based, and it was not engineering physics where they would, kind of go in and set something up and do as others have said, kind of trying and failing and figuring out different methods of it. They were mostly based on PhET simulations, actually. I wrote up quite a few for electric fields and magnetic fields and circuits in PhET simulations. So I have a few of those that I could share with people. One of them was actually written up by Bruce Palmquist, who was a colleague of mine back at Central Washington University, where I taught before, where I currently am. And a few more were ones that I wrote up. Some of them are more robust than others. Some of them are kind of more like mini labs. And on top of that, there is a case study on separating. Oh, my cat is trying to eat my TV remote right now. Sorry, I'm trying to kind of multitask
Protect
here.
the TV remote.
Yeah. Here's my kitty. Here's Petra. Oh, hi.
Oh,
Hello.
hello. We're waving. Hello.
Oh,
She's
hi. Petra,
beautiful.
there's people. There's people. Hey. Yeah. Okay, so
So,
anyway, actually a case study that was written up by Bruce that is available from SUNY Buffalo. They have a set of case studies all saved up, and this one is about separating trash with static electricity. And it's interesting because you actually have them go through and make predictions beforehand about what sort of separation that you should get, and then they'll actually take a look at the data afterwards and say, oh, well, I was more or less correct on that. And it's one where it's not a cookie cutter type lab. It's one where they really have to think about the setup of it and think about how a graph might look. It's one of those that if you have students that maybe aren't used to setting up a lot of stuff on their own, they'll be the ones who in class would be constantly raising their hand or during lab, like, oh, am I setting this up right? Like, this is my prediction. Is this okay? And that sort of thing. And then you'd have to remind them, of course, okay, your prediction is your prediction. You don't have to clear a prediction by me. I'm more concerned with you seeing whether your prediction matches the results or not. And then what else do I have? Oh, through Vernier, they have actually, for free, due to the prevalence of online classes this quarter, offered a number of data sets that they actually have. And some of them are quite useful. I will note that they're not super robust. They're not ones that you could do a full lab on, but it's a thing where they would, for instance, set up a resistor capacitor circuit, and you'd look at the current on it over time and how it's decreasing. And you could actually have them take those data points, plot them in Excel, and either take the log of them to make it linear or just fit a straight exponential curve to it and see what sort of a time constant they would get on that, and then figure out the capacitance of the capacitor from that. And that's one that, again, they don't have enough data on it to be a full lab, but it's a good activity for them to do. You could do it as a mini lab, which I'm planning on doing. So,
Anthony, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for this. And one thing I do want to say to folks who have joined us, that Anthony has been teaching online physics. And Anthony, so one thing that we're hoping to do, Lucas and I, is build this group a physics specific Canvas shell so folks can share resources. And so it certainly sounds like you have a lot that you could share with folks so they don't have to
mhm.
kind of reinvent the wheel. Is that?
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff that I can put on Canvas quite easily, or that I already have on Canvas. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also, I think it's helpful to know too, Chitra Solomonson, who just joined us, was asking me, who teaches online physics? And I was like, I don't know. So it's great to know who in the room has expertise. So
Yeah.
another person who wrote into the chat is Stephanie Bartlett. So Stephanie, I see that you also have a lot of experience teaching online. So could you share with us what you do for labs? And then I promise we will also get to exams.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Some of you might know me from QM or Canvas stuff under my previous last name, which is Diebel. And I've been teaching online for over 10 years, but mostly in the conceptual physics space. And then I teach on the ground, the engineering physics sequence. So, you know, those two worlds are meeting right now, as they are for everyone. So what I'm doing, I'm creating the labs as I go, but just for my own sanity, instead of trying to pull off 10 of them because of the time it takes to create these in Canvas, I'm doing 5. So I'm doing for my students basically an exam every other week and then a lab every other week. So they're partly that's due to just the time necessary to do a good job creating the product for them. I create my labs in Canvas. Anthony, you might do the same thing. I use the quiz tool for the lab, and I kind of bring my students through the labs using that quiz tool. And I'm using a lot of the PhET simulations as well. So I'm happy to share with folks. I can post as I go, like as I finish a lab. I can post them to whatever our common space is going to be, and I'm happy to do that. And then you guys, you can edit, do whatever you want with whatever gets posted there. But it'll save time, I think, if we can all share.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And yes, it will save time if everybody shares. And again, Lucas and I, as we organize these spaces for other folks, mostly Lucas, we try to figure out what the right organizing structure is. And so I guess one thing, you know, you mentioned the kind of like the conceptual theoretical space and then the engineering space. And so I'm just wondering if folks could type into the chat, what are the courses that you are most interested in sharing around? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? So yeah, so okay, so I see somebody wrote in 116. So what are is that Physics 116? What are the other courses that you might want to generate materials around? Okay. 11X and 22X. Engineering, physics for sure. Okay. Great. While we are, there's one thing Stephanie said that well, there's many things that Stephanie said, but there's one in particular I really want to kind of call out about how many labs people normally teach and what is reasonable for you and reasonable for students in this COVID-19 pandemic situation. So Stephanie, you said, how many labs again are you doing? 5, okay. And Anthony writes 5 or 6 labs is a good trade-off for this situation. Yeah, is there anyone who's doing more than that or fewer than that, or have people made decisions around that yet?
I haven't fully decided on my labs, and some of them, I'm not sure how well you could do it online, but I think Anthony was suggesting like simulated data. He was asking RC circuits. I was planning to do a lab like that where I think I was going to record myself doing the lab so I kind of see the setup and maybe start to take data and then maybe write a computer program or somehow just simulate data that they can then analyze. Do that with Ohm's law, Kirchhoff's rules as well. I'm not sure about others. I'm thinking about optics, and that you really, I think, literally want to see in person. So I'm not sure what to do about that.
Did I hear you say that optics is something, it's a learning outcome or a subject portion of your course that you're thinking you might not translate very well?
Well, doing optics, I think literally you want to see that in person, I think. So I'm not sure how well that would work.
So Stephanie just posted that there might be some RC sims and there's some good optic sims as well. Stephanie, do you want to speak to this?
Just to say that I think the role of the simulations, they're really good ones. And one of the things we can do in the Canvas shell that we're putting together, I think we should have a module just with simulations. And I'm happy to take the lead on that module. Just putting those in there for folks that haven't spent the time looking for those maybe yet. But I think those in combination with maybe a demo video or something like that. And there are plenty of those that already exist out there in space too. So don't be feeling like you have to create these videos. There's so much stuff out there. The thing I would vote for the Sims is that it gives the students a chance to manipulate stuff, and it's a little more interactive for the students. So even if that's just an optional part of what you're doing, I'd say definitely have the simulation be part of what you're doing. Even a simple simulation, like I wrote a lab to end last quarter, a double slit interference lab. And it was a really simple simulation, but it was enough, right? Where they could change the slit separation, they could change the screen distance. We don't have them at this level do that many crazy things anyway. So with just a few different variable things they can change, they can gather some data. So just some ideas.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And
Right.
I see, Anthony, you might also have some things to offer about optics.
Yeah, a couple. So I have one lab that's actually written up for a PhET simulation for refraction, and you can refract light through a couple different materials. You can have unknown materials and then go back to a table and from the index of refraction try to figure out what materials they are. And you can also, in this simulation, do a total internal reflection. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. And I believe, I haven't used this for class, but I believe they also have one for converging and diverging lenses where you can try different lenses out and see light spreading.
That is awesome. Stephanie is nodding as well. So yeah, go ahead, Per. And please tell me if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
No, very good. Danish first name, French last name. Yeah, we're going a little bit different direction. Now I've got the advantage is I'm able to get into the lab with a police escort, but we divided and conquered amongst all the physics faculty because a lot of labs are very parallel. When I was teaching at UW Seattle, the engineering labs and the algebra-based labs were identical except the number at the top of the lab. So in terms of the actual lab progression, the lab reports were a little different. We're recording the labs and then having an interactive session. They're asynchronous, so they're optional, but they're interactive. So students watch us perform the labs and can interact with us. And then we're using the Logger Pro tool, is literally posting up the data files as if you had collected it and you sort of participated a bit with it, because I mean, so much of the benefit of the lab is seeing it, especially when nature is different than you think it is, and being able to go, aha, are you going to believe your lying eyes? Well, we lose a little bit of that, but we get some of that back, and then they analyze the files and do the data manipulation and data reduction with that. I would agree with Stephanie. That's taking some time because it hardly ever goes right the first time. So what we're really doing is we're performing the lab, collecting the data, and then we might have the second or third take data set available, because the one you take live will always have a nice big spike right in the middle of it for fun. And I apologize, I have to dash off because my department scheduled the department meeting on top
No,
of this.
this is great. This is great. And I know that I have your email, but if you could just type it into the chat before you leave, and if you would be willing to share what your department has contributed, and then I'm sure that we'll have lots of resources to give back to you. All right. So one thing that is in the chat that actually, I guess maybe, does anyone else want to take the mic and just talk a little bit about what you are doing with labs? And thanks to Anthony, Stephanie, and Per for their really substantial contributions. What else are people doing for labs right now that they would like to share?
Hi, this is Chitra Solomonson from Green River College. I kind of threw in the towel this week and went into my office, and I had a camera pointing to my my whiteboard rather, and had a little circuit set up on my desk, cleaned out my desk, put a circuit on it, and had my Surface Pro pointing at the circuit, and actually went off fabulously. I have to admit, I'm in a unique position. I'm not in a teaching a big, my standard, fare. I'm not teaching engineering physics or algebra-based physics. I'm teaching an undergraduate research class on solar cells, where students are supposed to make the solar cells for half the quarter, and now they're not able to do that. So it's been kind of a challenge. But I do have 4 or 5 labs set up. And I started with, I think, Anthony, you referred to it earlier, with Pivots Interactives, which works closely with Logger Pro. And it's fairly inexpensive. So it's like $5 a student or something like that. And so we worked on non-ohmic devices, plotting voltage current characteristics, and now we're going to do a lab on maximizing power output from solar cells, and there's, I think, a lab on photoelectric effect. So there are some relevant labs that they have. But it is frustrating because there's not a lot of openness there. It's fairly, for example, you can't fit a curve on Pivot. You'll have to redo the data in Excel and do it, which is not a bad thing for the students to learn. But, it's really about engaging the students, and I'm going week by week, literally, because I don't normally teach online, unlike Stephanie or Anthony. So it's been a bit of a struggle, but $5 per student. Oh, I see. Yeah. Vernier is offering data sets for free. Anthony, I meant we just bought a whole bunch of licenses. We bought 100 licenses because it's covered by the student fee, right? Easily. And so we were able to do that. And Keith and I am primarily using this. Keith is my colleague in physics, and Keith has about 60 students among his 3 sections. I have number of students in my class can be counted on one hand. This is a very specialized boutique class that the administration approved. And so, we're able to pull it off. So students I can put any experiment I want into my personal library for the class. There are limitations, but it was a good, we had to do this turnaround in 2 or 3 days and make a course online. So it worked out well in that sense. But 2 other colleagues of mine, I should say 3 other colleagues of mine, are simply taking videos of themselves doing the lab. And I think they're just going to give students data and let them analyze it. I think that's the plan right now. Anyway, I'll keep quiet now and listen
You're
to the
doing
other.
great. You're doing great. And I appreciate you sharing this. Thank you. And also, I just wanted to say that I think in this environment, doing it week by week and being very flexible and very responsive, like, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I would build out a course and put a lot of labor into it and then be very attached to it and then not want to let it
Yes.
go when it wasn't really working for the students. And so
Yeah.
I think that's fine to just do it. It's I know it's a lot of work, but I think it might be better in this context.
Yes. Actually, that has been the greatest lesson to learn here. I'm also science division chair. And so I've been, there's been a lot of angst in the last 2 weeks on how to go online in the physics and chemistry, for example. And so I've been, basically my primary job, most of my time has been spent in the last few weeks fielding these questions and trying to lend support to my colleagues. It's been really, really hard for science.
Yeah.
And it's been my job to also educate the rest of campus and the administration about how hard it is for science.
Yeah.
Because some of the other disciplines don't have that challenge.
Art and music are struggling a little bit too.
What's that?
Yeah.
Art and music are struggling a little bit too.
Yeah. And we have trades, how do you teach welding online?
Yeah.
And we have the allied health sciences, OTA, PTA, all that stuff. So there are challenges in other departments too, but it's what you said, Jennifer, you have this ideal course in mind and you just have to throw it out of the window and start over.
Yeah. We all kind of have to let go of the ideal for the real
Yes.
these days. So one thing that I would love that I'd love it if we could talk about this. And Lucas, I'm hoping maybe you could address this. So Mackenzie has a couple of questions in the chat. And one in particular is students in person labs using lab equipment, and normally her students spend a lot of time figuring this out. So and setting them up for lab work in real life in a way that Sims don't. And I know, Lucas, you've taught online for a long time using Sims, and so I guess I'm just wondering, could you speak to that? I know you have a perspective on this.
Yeah, well, I think it varies on the system you're using, for sure. Some of the sims are very robotic in the sense that you don't have a chance to mess up. You can't manipulate things, and Stephanie spoke to that. And other simulations allow you to manipulate and mess up and screw up and figure it out. And that can be good or bad in terms of dealing with students online and the frustrations, for sure. And then it becomes the finding the good sims and the cost. So I think it's a big conversation around that. I know I've used Lapster and a variety of different ones that have the ability for students to screw up. But Lapster, I don't know that paying for any simulation right now is the best choice in this situation. It's trying to figure out what we can do low tech, low cost this quarter. But I think, it's just getting us to understand we're not going to be able to replicate perfectly what we do in lab. And it's just trying to figure out, okay, how do we meet our learning outcomes? How do we still do our job? We're all intelligent, creative individuals, even though we may not feel like it sometimes. We're all capable of figuring that out. So I think it's figuring out ways, even if it's not a perfect simulation, is how do we make it more inquiry-based? How do we make it more where they're manipulating? And it's been a long time since I took calc physics, so it's not my content area. But you guys are all capable of doing it. It sounds like you guys have amazing ideas already that I think can be organized and put in and used. And then you just continue to get better at it. If we're still teaching, which I imagine we will be online for a little while, you just continue to adjust and adapt and get better at those. And then, Mackenzie, you talked about maybe getting teams to work together. I think it's a great idea. I don't know with just kind of the download speeds and everybody on Zoom or Collaborate or whatever, how that would work if someone was sharing a sim live in a setting like that. I don't know if that would work. I haven't tried it. I don't know if anybody else on here has tried that, but I think that's a great idea that maybe 2 teachers or 3 teachers could try first and see how well it worked, because that would be cool to get 2 or 3 students together working on a simulation, asking questions, manipulating it, because there's going to be a lot more learning that takes place there and support for one student who may feel like they're lost in the situation or struggle with the tech, I think it's a really good idea. So I'd love to hear if anybody has tried that or has any knowledge around that.
Does anyone have experience with this? Or Mackenzie, do you want to share with us a little bit more about what you're thinking or what you might try?
On Wednesday, we're gonna try it. We'll see how it goes. I think in Zoom, there's some way to like let someone else control your screen. So like maybe some screen sharing with like letting other people take over is gonna, I have no idea how it's gonna work. We'll see. I'll let you know.
I do want to say thank you for being a pioneer and and like early on in this conversation somebody wrote like students need to make mistakes, and I have a feeling we're probably all going to make some mistakes and learn fail fast, um, and be so much improved as a result. But I really hope that when you try this, I really hope that you could share with us about how that goes. That would be awesome. Thank you. One thing I did want to ask, if there's one more lab question I kind of want to highlight from William Asher about people using cell phones or tablets as a sensor for physics labs, using a camera as a light meter for polarization measurements, or using the I can't say that word. I was an English major, and a lot of devices for at-home EM measurements. And I'm just wondering, does anyone have anything to share to William about that? William, do you want to say anything about what you're thinking about doing that?
Well, I'm just sort of kicking the idea around in my mind. I know that that there's a bunch of textbooks that have sort of mini labs set up using magnetometers. And I know that a lot of cell phones have magnetometers included in them. And they look to be pretty sensitive because they're basically the compass. They're the electronic compass that they use for navigation. So I think they could be used as a resource. And most cell phone cameras like that, you've talked about Vernier, and I think they're the ones that make the Physics Toolbox sensor suite that that has in it accelerometers from the cell phone, and it can access the camera to use it as a light meter. And so, and I've just been toying around with in the back of my head about whether or not you could do an optics experiment on polarization using blue sky, because Rayleigh scattering is polarizing. And so you could take a pair of sunglasses, put it between the camera sensor and the skylight, and then rotate it around, and you might be able to see the increase and decrease of intensity of sunlight as a polarization experiment. And that would lead them in. There's a classic, I don't know if it's true, but there's the apocryphal story about the guy taking his physics PhD exam, and the final thing before he got that door was the professor leaned back and he goes, "Why is the sky blue?" And it went off into a series of drilling down questions into quantum chromodynamics as to why Rayleigh scattering works, right? And so there's multiple levels that I think you could do things like that on, but I'm new to teaching physics this year, and certainly new to teaching physics online, and it's really kicking me in terms of trying to get all this stuff formulated into a coherent set of labs. And so I'm wondering if I can't have been the only one that recognized that these cell phones we carry around are this wealth of sensor information, sensor technology that could be used for this. The accelerometers, for example, in there, you could put a cell phone on a cart and measure the readout of the acceleration and things like that for physics labs. So I'm thinking that other people maybe have these already set up, and I'm just curious if people have thought about that. So sorry.
No, you're doing great. And this has been very helpful for me, just thinking it, and again, lots of people are chiming in about the phone sensor, the phone sensor technology, although Mackenzie does have a really good point about possibly students not having smartphones. And so Mackenzie, I think that's such a great point, to make sure that if you haven't done a tech survey with your students, making sure that you do a tech survey with them. And so just so you know, so if a student doesn't have a smartphone, can you adapt a lab or give them an alternative lab instead?
I've actually run into that already, where I had a lab for a different course set up using the pressure sensor, the barometer. and I found out that a lot of my students didn't have a phone that had a barometer. Like some of the cheaper
Okay.
models don't have a barometer. But so that was an issue. And what I've convinced my institution to do is we bought a couple of tablets that have all the sensors in them. And so I was going to give those out to students as to use, but it's hard to get them to them in terms of you know, with the lockdown and things. So yeah, it's an issue, but most cell phones have a camera, right?
Yeah.
And all of these kids, at least the ones I've dealt with, have some cell phone, and the camera doesn't even require them to be connected to the internet. It's a tough thing, right? But I don't know. I don't have a good answer for it. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, it's fun for us to kind of noodle on these potentials and possibilities. And Chitra has a good point in the chat that about focusing on solutions for right now, that there are papers out there where smartphone apps have been used, but finding quick solutions that can be used right now while we work for longer term solutions in case COVID-19 conditions persist longer. So again, like as this group, I'm hoping that this group will want to meet again with a little bit of frequency so we can kind of learn from each other as we go along. So there might be short-term solutions and long-term solutions. One thing, Mackenzie, could you share a little bit? I thought this was really cool. I missed this in the chat that you, Mackenzie, have, you said students all have paper and pens and glasses of water. Could you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, so I'm teaching optics this quarter and just sort of thinking about like, I want them to have something that they can actually put their hands on. And so I was like, what can they actually look at? And I was like, okay, most of them have like a mirror in their home somewhere. Or if not a mirror, they all have a webcam, which can work as a mirror. They have like a glass of water, and you know, you can like stick a pencil in the glass of water, right, and see that the pencil looks bent. And like, you know, just trying to think about like, I was like, do you have hair ties that you can like, because we're doing simple harmonic oscillators too, like, or rubber bands that you could make something that bounces. Just because I keep wanting them to have something that they can touch instead of just simulations. And I've sort of been thinking that that'll only be qualitative, not quantitative, because some of them don't even have rulers or things like that. But it at least to have something where they can see it in front of them. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, you know, like especially in these first few weeks when your students are stressed out, they might be caring for somebody or as many people, they might have kids at home. Like one thing that came up yesterday in the majors or in all the biology conversations was trying to design things that kids could also be part of. And so, you know, like parents teaching their kids or just doing the activity with their kids. And so it seems like what you're doing is very compassionate, very equitable, and if it's real to them, then I don't know, there just seems like a lot of potential in what you talked about. So thank you. Chitra has a colleague who has asked her students to make a physical pendulum. Chitra, do you think Adrienne would be willing to share that with the Canvas shell?
Oh yes, I'm sure she will. I don't think she's here with our group right now. But I think, and this is from hearing it from both sides, from the student side. One of her students came and talked to me about it, as well as Adrienne herself. So I think she just has them collect stuff from whatever's lying around, and you know, take a string or a rope and tie something to it. It can't be a point mass, so they have to figure out the center of mass, and you know, figure out what with the physical pendulum equation, figure out what the period ought to be, and then do some measurements. I think she has them doing group work on it, which is interesting. I don't know how well that's working out. I have to ask her.
Thank you so much. And also the chat is alive right now. Stephanie, would you consider just sharing with folks about your lab kit and especially how it's no materials OER code, no materials cost OER, and how you're shipping them for free?
Sure. Yeah. So this is just for my conceptual course, which I've been teaching for a long time. We have a custom lab kit for that course, and it's with some really basic materials in it. so that those students can do basic measurements with like calipers, and I think there's a spring scale in there. I have the whole list and I'll share that out. But one of the issues that we are having now is that, of course, students can't come to campus to borrow that kit, which normally they borrow it and then return it. So I asked my boss, can we ship them all out for free to students, because I want this class to continue to be no cost. We use an OER textbook, and that's one of the things I like about it. And so our administration agreed. I'm so excited. So they agreed to pay to ship all these kits out. And we're just going to hope right now that campus will be open in June for the kits to come back. But we figure we'll deal with that when the time comes. I have a bunch of students that are overseas. So for those students, I just assembled a shopping list and told them these are the things that you need for the class. And for that class, probably about 3/4 of the labs are hands-on with the equipment from the kit, and about 1/4 of them are using simulations.
Stephanie, this is amazing. And thank you too for addressing just all the different challenges. Like that's, especially with international students, how you're handling that. Thank you. That's very helpful. I do want to make sure we get to exams, but Charles Mueller has a really provocative, insightful thing in the chat. And so Charles, I'm wondering if you might voice that to us.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I wouldn't mind expanding on that. So I know that a lot of the labs that physics teachers do are based around like seeing a certain phenomenon, or maybe like, Snell's law or whatever. But what I think might be helpful is to refocus the whole idea of labs to ensuring the students learn how to design an experiment and take data and analyze that data, which is kind of what we're doing at my college, Edmonds Community College. All of our labs, we just let the students design an experiment that they can, and usually they find these experiments online or whatever. And we have lots of equipment that can do lots of things that's very adaptable. So for example, we have these pocket labs that can allow us to, basically it's an accelerometer and a pressure sensor and all kinds of stuff that connects via Bluetooth to your phone. And there's loads of experiments that have already been done with these pocket labs online. And so students will just try and recreate one of those. They'll design something else on their own. And what that does is it relieves me of worrying about, I'm covering optics this week, so I got to make sure I figure out in the lab to do Snell's law. And then it just becomes, here students design an experiment, take the data, present that data to me, and that makes it a much more engaging experience for the student because they're taking ownership of the experimental process instead of being told what to do.
Charles, thank you so much. And I think that is a refreshing, exciting take on this. And again, to just people sharing their different approaches, I think is really useful, especially when it gives permission. John, I just want to read what you wrote in the chat. A pendulum lab would be simple to create. I remember doing something like that in my high school physics class way back when. I like it. And again, like for certain physics courses, and again, this came up in Bio 160 yesterday, that there might not actually be a lot of difference conceptually between what happens in a high school seniors class and your introduction to physics course. And so I think, again, too, just remembering that, sometimes simple and fun and exciting, and, that's also great too. So one thing I would like to do, it's 11:40, it's actually 11:42. I'm wondering if we could move to exams, because Stephanie, I know you've been teaching online for a long time and you have the labs thing kind of dialed in, but exams. So could you speak to a little bit right now about like, what are your worries, concerns, fears, questions about exams online?
Everything, I don't know. I've written my first exam, so we're having it at the end of next week. And I'm using HonorLock, but I don't feel super good about it. I think I'm just not going to feel okay about how this goes off. And I think part of this is me accepting all the imperfections. And I'm really aware that students are stressed right now. And I worry about HonorLock adding to their stress. I think students are feeling isolated, and some students are feeling intimidated by the technology. So I'm doing an HonorLock practice quiz with them this week so that they can just go through the HonorLock process. And I'm going to do, I think, 4 or 5 exams in total with no final exam. That's my strategy. And just, I don't know, I'm trying, and at the end of the exam, what I'm going to have them do is all their written work, they will need to upload that as a PDF to support everything that they answered in the exam problem. And I don't know. So that's what I'm doing. I don't feel great about it. I think that's my issue.
So Lucas has used HonorLock, I think, at Lower Columbia. Lucas, what do you want to say in response to Stephanie? Or everyone, actually. Everyone who's having the same, I don't feel great about this.
Yeah, no, I think that Stephanie brings up great points. I've used HonorLock in our online classes for the last year. We've switched over from other proctoring services to that. And I've also taught it where I don't have any proctoring, and we do different types of tests. You know, we're doing different types of assessments where there are more case studies or inquiry and things that they can't just, you know, I want them to look it up because they're really difficult and they build their learning. HonorLock is better than most of the ones I've seen, but you're right. I think there are plenty of students in a normal quarter that they get overwhelmed with the technology. They get frustrated because they move too much, and the algorithms built into HonorLock detect their movements, and so someone jumps in and says, "Hey, what's going on?" And they get that figured out, and that can be frustrating and stressful for a student. If you're wearing a hat too low, that's going to signal something to the algorithms. So there are definitely those issues in terms of students, but far less than most of the other ones I've seen. If you're worried about that, if it was just me teaching, I would get rid of all the proctoring and develop assessments that don't require proctoring, that are more built around just kind of getting them to learn and which meet their outcomes. But we all work in departments, and we all have all sorts of conflicting things that pull and, you know, and require certain elements in our classes. So, and if you're teaching, you know, 150 students, sometimes efficiency becomes more important than specific quality in assessments at times, because you don't have the time to grade that many case study or essay questions. And I get all that because we're all asked to teach a lot. So yes, I think with HonorLock and some of those, you're going to find that. If you're going to use HonorLock, it's just about having that flexibility and patience with the students and understanding there's going to be those issues, reopening exams, maybe providing an alternative if there's an issue. I know in the past I've just had them, you know, re-answer questions and send them to me, and we just figure things out as we go, because it's hard to fix some of those issues if they have, you know, you didn't bring up the fact that they could have students running in while they're taking the test, right? Or I mean, children running in while they're taking their test. They could be trying to homeschool, all of those things that we're all dealing with as well. I was holding my 9-month-old when we started this meeting, so it definitely is a complicated situation, more than normal. And I think especially because a lot of us are taking face-to-face courses and moving them online. But a lot of these aren't even necessarily the ones that have been online. And so those are two different types of students a lot of times. And so that's the other part to think about.
I will say, from talking to the biology faculty, there have been a lot of not concerns, but just, you know, kind of, I'll just say Bryce Battisti has been teaching online at Bates for a long time. And Bryce, I can't remember if they use Respond as Lockdown or HonorLock, but he said that this quarter, you know, he hasn't changed anything really from the course, but students are having a lot more trouble because the campus isn't open. So they don't have access to the normal student support things that they would to take the tests. So I do think, like, if it's at all possible to avoid using HonorLock and Respond as Lockdown, and maybe do, like, I feel like Lucas addressed this, but you know, if there's any way to maybe just remove that piece of it, if you can, I think that would be. Sorry, one thing that Mackenzie has asked is, can we talk more about alternative assessments? She's been thinking about individual oral exams one-to-one with me, but that seems like it's going to be really time intensive. And John has asked if he could talk about alternative assessments and thinking about oral exams. So keeping in mind too what Lucas said about, not killing yourself with too much grading, which I also get worried about, faculty burnout during these times. What kind of alternatives are folks considering? And Lucas just wrote into the chat that possibly assessments could be a better topic for the next meeting. So Stephanie and other folks who are asking about online exams, was what we told you helpful, or are there further questions or further things that you might want to, or comments back, or just what you're thinking about?
If I might, oh, sorry, this is Christine from Everett. I think it was really just comforting to hear everybody level set about how we're all feeling, and I think I just had to emotionally come to grips with the shortcomings of online assessment as opposed to finding a logical solution.
Yeah, I'd say same here. And I appreciated, Lucas, I appreciated your perspective on HonorLock too. Thank you.
By the way, we just found out that, I didn't know about this, that Respondus is not, doesn't work with Chromebooks. And a lot of our Running Start students in the Kent School District use Chromebooks. So we have had to go to HonorLock. And back to the feeling of discomfort, especially among science faculty, many of them want to give a time test, with supervision, and they're still grappling with that. So that is something that's hard on them. So towards the end of winter quarter, we went online for exams at Green River, and I did what someone just mentioned. I gave an open book, open web, open whatever exam. But it was fair, I gave them some extra time because of getting used to technology, but not that much more time. And it turned out the grades weren't that different. It was a time test, and I let them, because I couldn't proctor them, and I didn't want a camera staring down their face, and I didn't want to constrain them by lack of technology. I decided to make everything open, and I had a couple of hard questions there, and my average turned out to be just about the same. I did feel uncomfortable because I felt a couple of students at least, gamed the system, and I think they did better than they would have normally. But like I said, things are not normal right now. So you just have to come to grips with that.
Yeah. Hey, Jen, can I speak to a couple things? The one thing, and Chitra, thank you for sharing that. That was really good. I just wanted to speak to the idea that the shortcomings of online assessment. I think we really want to try to reframe our thinking there, in the sense of it feels like a shortcoming compared to what a lot of us are used to doing. But that doesn't mean it's a shortcoming. There's so many creative, amazing things you can do online that you can't do in class. And in a lot of ways, it's advantageous. Even in a world like physics, where you're doing so much lab stuff, there are so many cool things that you can do with technology in a virtual environment. And I know the spring offers unique setting, but try not to think of it as a shortcoming, and think of it as, I have this unique environment to do some cool assessments that maybe will change the way I think about the way I assess normally going forward. And so it's a great opportunity to explore that. We're supposed to be long-term learners as well. So it's a great chance for us to continue to learn about our own teaching and assessment. And the more I teach online, the more I evaluate my assessment, honestly, more than anything, is how I'm assessing learning and what kind of activities I can design. So try to think of it that way. I think it's an important caveat as we move into this kind of new age, even more being forced by this pandemic.
Lucas, thank you so much. That was excellent. And Stephanie has a comment in the chat. New quizzes in Canvas has a hotspot question feature that's really cool. Stephanie, thank you. So one thing that I would love in our last 7 minutes is, would this group like to meet again?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yay. And so I think my next question is this a good day and time? Or would folks prefer an afternoon meeting? Because otherwise it's easy to just say, let's just meet again this time next week, and know that it will be recorded and posted into the Canvas shell. Charles is saying I'd prefer afternoons on Tuesdays. How does that work for folks?
I can't do anything at 3 o'clock every day because that's when I meet my class. But I can do 1 o'clock. I think it's good to change the times once in a while. I think actually I have a conflict at 11 next Tuesday, but I'll let you know, Jennifer.
Okay.
But, the other thing I wanted to point out was please spread the word, those of you who are here among your colleagues, because I sent out a spam email to everybody. The list I had was from AAPT Washington. I sent it to everybody. But I think telling your colleagues personally would really help to bring them to the table.
Yeah, and the one thing I didn't do this week that I have been doing is, I've been sending out special announcements like physics meeting at this day and this time versus a big, here are all the meetings we're having this week. And so I do think, at the risk of me overwhelming people with email, I do think me sending out very specific emails like physics faculty, I am calling you, here is your email, here is your thing. So I can step up on that too to help. Lucas has a question about the Canvas shell organized for resources, and he is thinking labs, simulations, assessments, at-home activities, or would you rather have it be organized by course? Like when you think about when you go to a Canvas shell and what you would like to see, is it better for us to organize it by course?
I would prefer topics myself because, like someone mentioned, we cover the same topics, whether it's algebra-based or calculus-based, right? And so we can take that particular activity and pare it down or, increase it to our liking, make it more complex.
I think I agree with that.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. So anything else that people would like to, Lucas, sorry, first Lucas, is that helpful, Lucas?
So are you thinking just like if you looked at your course outcomes, just general topics you're going to cover in your course? Is that what you'd like how it to be organized?
Yeah, Lucas, are you going to be doing this? Because I can, if so, I don't know who's going to be doing this, but I'd be happy to. We could start a doc with the major topics. I mean, all of us know what those are, but if a physics person wants to jump in and start listing topics that we normally cover, starting with kinematics and.
Yeah, that would be great. If you guys wanted to just get a Google Doc with some of your major topics, and then we can, once we get the course organized, you guys are going to be the ones using it. I just want to help get it organized and I'll help check in and keep it organized. But yeah, if we could get a Google Doc,
okay.
Maybe when Jen usually sends out a follow-up email, maybe Jen, we could just create a Google Doc, stick it on there, and then you guys could add there. And I would say let's try to keep it to a probably in the 5 to 7 range in terms of the topics would probably be useful.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So in the follow-up, I'll send out a blank Google Doc with a heading and directions just so folks remember. But I think that would be very helpful. Is there anything else that folks would like any burning question that we didn't answer? Any last minute sort of just, I really want to share this with the group. What are people thinking about before we leave?
I just had a quick question about the PhET interactives. That's not the simulations, the PhET simulations. So those of you who are using it, are your students able to use it at home with the technology they have? Is that a problem for any of them?
Mackenzie is writing yes in the chat.
All right.
Anyone else? So maybe Chitra Mackenzie is the only person who.
Okay, Mackenzie, I might just email you later with a question.
Oh, and Stephanie says my students have been fine using them. Anthony, yeah. Okay, so that's good to know.
I try to use the HTML5 simulations mostly.
Okay.
Sometimes I use the other ones. When I've used the Java simulations, most students have been able to use them, some students can't.
Okay, that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and William says the HTML5 are good. The Java can be problematic.
And someone's going to post the activities you've done around it. Stephanie, was that you or someone else?
I think Anthony had some.
Yeah.
I have quite a number of them, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to post stuff too once we get it organized. I was going to suggest that we organize the way that Lucas had laid out, so modules for labs, activities, and then maybe within, et cetera, and then within those modules organized for topic.
Yeah, I like that.
We have at my institution, we have like what we call the physics lab library, which is all our lab information for associate faculty in a Canvas shell. So I can, if you want, I can go in and try to like, I'll put my stuff up, labeling it the way that we do.
Okay,
that would be awesome. Stephanie, also, how cool that you do that for your adjunct faculty. That's awesome. Okay, so anything else? Anthony just wrote, I have a number of conceptual discussion posts for physics and astronomy. That would be awesome, Anthony. Thank you. Thanks. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And again, I'm sorry that I was late. It's just been I'm sure we all have those moments, like one day you're fine. And then the next day you're like, I'm on the brink of a breakdown. And then the next day you're fine. So, so I'm sorry you got me on a brink of the breakdown. I will do some self-care and I'll be much higher functioning the next time we chat. And so thanks again. Oh, sorry, go ahead. What?
You're doing great, Jennifer.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
A lot. A lot. Yeah.
Thanks. I love these discussions. I love hearing faculty talk to other faculty about what they're doing and this opportunity to share with each other and just commiserate. So it's a real honor. I just always like to be my best self, So, and thank you for everyone for being here, sharing your experiences with each other. And I'm really excited to see you next week at a time that we will determine when Lucas and I look through the chat. And thanks again. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.